What's up, Canucks Nation, Canuck fans? Welcome back to the Nucks Report, or if you're new, welcome to the Nucks Report. This is, of course, episode 8 of the Nucks Report. We took a little bit of a hiatus around the Olympics, and then obviously last week I was unable to do this because of some technical difficulties, but we're back, and we're doing this Nucks Report on a Tuesday night, or a Tuesday afternoon rather, instead of a Monday usual. But we will hopefully be going back to our Mondays starting next week. But I wanted to bring this to you guys since I missed it the last few weeks. And we have some interesting topics to talk about in this Nucks Report. We have, as you can see down at the bottom, we're going to be talking about Nils Hoglander and the potential he could become Podkolzin 2.0, as Canucks management may very well have given up on Hoglander, and he very well could face a similar path that Vasily Podkolzin faced when he was actually ended up shipped out of town, and then he ended up flourishing in Edmonton. That could be a possible scenario for Hoglander in the future. And we're also going to talk about how ownership is reportedly 100% on board with a full rebuild. And by full rebuild, I mean like 5-year rebuild. Ownership is apparently and reportedly on board with it. We're going to talk about that. We're also, in our last segment, we're going to go over and preview the Canucks versus the Florida Panthers as the Panthers come into town. And, of course, we get to face the defending Stanley Cup champions, although both of these teams are likely, well, I know the Canucks for sure are not likely to make the playoffs. Panthers don't look like they're going to be doing their three-peat anytime soon. So we're going to talk about that as well. But let's go ahead and jump into our first topic. We're going to talk about Nils Hoglander. And this article is actually brought to us by our friends at Daily Hive. Matter of fact, it's brought to us by our friend of the podcast, none other than Beggsy, known as Trevor Beggs. And of course, he titles this article, "Is History Doomed to Repeat Itself for the Vancouver Canucks with Nils Hoglander?" So let's go ahead and talk about this. This was obviously written on Saturday, so please excuse some of the wording in this. It came out on Saturday, but we're reading this on a Tuesday. But Beggsy goes on to say, "The trauma of being a Vancouver Canucks fan is real. Just this season, Canucks fans have watched their former players absolutely tear it up in other markets, from Bo Horvat making Team Canada at the Olympics to Quinn Hughes continuing to rewrite the record books with the Minnesota Wild. The same has, of course, been true for Vasily Podkolzin with the Edmonton Oilers. After being traded away by the Canucks in exchange for a 4th-round pick back in 2024, the Russian winger has gone on to cement himself as a physical, reliable, everyday winger for the Oilers. Podkolzin currently has 30 points in 67 games. The only Edmonton forwards with more points are Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Zach Hyman. The Canucks have struggled mightily to develop young players into consistent, useful NHL players, which is exactly what happened with Podkolzin. It does make you wonder, is history doomed to repeat itself with Nils Hoglander, the Canucks' second selection in the 2019 NHL draft after Podkolzin? It's been a hellacious season for the Swedish winger. After a preseason ankle injury forced him out of the lineup until December, he clearly was behind the NHL pace for a while after his return. On the season, he just has 1 goal and 3 points in 25 games. Although his offense has dissipated, he's created more chances than any other Canucks forward as of late. During the Canucks' last 10 games, he leads the team in scoring chances per 60 at 5-on-5. At least the time of this article, I'm not sure if that has since changed, because he did sit out those 2 games. Despite looking like one of the better forwards on this moribund team in this latest stretch, he can't find a way to stay in the lineup. Now, Hoglander was, of course, scratched for a second straight game on Saturday against the Seattle Kraken. The 5'9" forward has endured tough seasons before, but this one might just as well take the cake. It was tough to come back from that surgery, came back, was scratched, he said last week, came back again, then the Olympic break, then I got injured again. Now I'm coming back with my speed and grit, so yeah, right direction. It looked like he was trending in that right direction before his trip back to the press box. And this is a big reason why I did not like his benching. Based on the fact that Hoglander has failed to earn the trust of 4 head coaches, count that, 1, 2, 3, 4 head coaches in Vancouver, it's fair to wonder if he might meet a similar fate as Podkolzin. Because, of course, there was a time when Podkolzin also wasn't trusted by the Canucks' coaching staff. They called me in for a meeting and told me for several reasons, right now, you're not at the NHL player level, Podkolzin said last year on a podcast that was translated from Russian to English. They told me your work ethic is definitely the best. You're in the best shape of anyone. They were like, your hockey IQ isn't at the NHL level. You're making the wrong decisions out there. That line really stuck with me. Vancouver clearly made a mistake by trading Podkolzin for pennies on the dollar to Edmonton, and that was a mistake that was amplified by the fact that they used that very same fourth-round pick to acquire Evander Kane. Ironically, Kane is now blocking Hoglander's path to the lineup. There's been no direction that the Canucks want to trade Hoglander. However, another coach making him ride the bench, coupled with the fact that the team is listening on everybody outside of a few select players, makes you wonder if it is possible. Dealing Hoglander may not be as straightforward for the Canucks since he now makes $3 million per season. Still, you'd have to imagine there are NHL teams that may be willing to take a flyer on him if the Canucks no longer believe in the player. Of course, if that were to happen, it would be easy to see Hoglander having a Podkolzin-like ascension. And that is, of course, something I really hope we do not see. Obviously, I've made it known I'm a big fan of Hoglander. I have not liked him, being scratched. Obviously, this is so he had the 2 games recently. He was scratched in December. 3, maybe 4 times that Hoglander now has been a healthy scratch in this. So definitely hope Hoglander does get some playing time. Hopefully after Kane has his, gets to his 1,000 games. I even said on a recent post-game show that, you don't have to sit Hoglander in order to make sure Kane gets to that 1,000 game mark. You can sit Douglas, which they apparently have done for at least tonight's game. But obviously you also kind of want to get Douglas into the lineup, and because he's a UFA at the end of the season. So we're not sure if he will be back with the Canucks next season. So we'll see on that front, but definitely you need to have Hoglander in the lineup. And of course, we have seen his chemistry with Elias Pettersson. He plays really well with Pettersson. Obviously, they're friends, off the ice. And we've seen how PD can play with Hoglander. And I still think they should have Hoglander on that top line with Pettersson, maybe kind of jolt Pettersson a little bit. And maybe it can also work out for Hoglander in the end as well. But let's take a look at this next article and our next topic, which is, of course, we're talking about Canucks ownership. And the fact that they could very well be on, 100% on board with a rebuild. Of course, we've all talked about, Aquilini and the fact that he's never been okay for a rebuild. We've seen guys Mike Gillis get the can. We've seen Trevor Linden leave the organization because he suggested a rebuild. And of course, ownership wasn't too fond of that. But it looks like now, for some reason, ownership reportedly is 100% fully on board with a long-term rebuild, as this article also on the Daily Hive, written by Rob Williams, goes on to say, as with the headline, Vancouver Canucks ownership finally fully on board with a long-term rebuild. This is, of course, a report. But looking at this, goes on to say, when Mike Gillis wanted to rebuild, he was fired. Eventually, Trevor Linden insisted on rebuilding. That's when he became the odd man out. So now that the current Vancouver Canucks management team appears to be on track for a long rebuild, what does Francesco Aquilini really think about this? Well, it sounds like Canucks owner is into it, which is a bit of a, shock and surprise to some. The ownership is fully on board, Canucks insider Irfan Ghaffar said on the DFO Rundown Insider Edition podcast. The ownership knows that it's probably going to take at least 5 years until they're really, really competitive again. You have Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin knowing that and having the okay by the ownership. People have questioned, of course, how patient the Canucks ownership would be given what happened in the past. Even Linden sounded surprised when speaking about it Saturday on Hockey Night in Canada's After Hours program. I think in 2014, when I came in as president of hockey operations, I knew it was a tough spot to come into. There wasn't a lot to work with there. We had a great group of guys, but they were on the back nine. It was a tough spot. My vision of how things would go was different than ownership or Jim Benning, so I was the odd man out, Linden said, referring to his exit from the organization in 2018. I think the situation they're in today, I think Patrick is doing the right things. I think it's a bit surprising given the history. So even Trevor Linden himself is surprised that the Canucks are going this direction. Canucks management, of course, drew the ire of fans by labeling it as a hybrid rebuild in December, but their words and actions since then have been more consistent with what you'd expect from a true rebuilding team. Obviously, compiling draft capital. They shipped out some veterans in Garland and Myers at the deadline. They haven't traded those picks away to get, players that can help them win now. So that is obviously a positive with this management group. The Canucks have, of course, sunk to the bottom of the standings and appear destined for a top 3 draft pick for the first time since 1999. Of course, there's talks about, they're most likely going to pick 3rd. But as I've continued to mention, they're guaranteed a top 3 pick if they do finish in 32nd. Yes, they're not guaranteed 1st or 2nd overall, but they're at least guaranteed a top 3 pick, which Canucks fans should be ecstatic about. I know I am. Yes, I want them to draft McKenna and end up drafting 1st overall because it would be great for this organization. But keep in mind, they're at least guaranteed a top 3 pick. So regardless of where they draft, they are going to draft one heck of a player for the future for sure. They have also accumulated more draft picks than ever before since the Aquilini family bought the team in 2004. The Canucks currently have 10 picks in 2026, including 2 first-rounders, plus 9 picks in each of the 2027 and 2028 drafts. The proof will be in the pudding, of course, and there's a lot more work that needs to be done, but it is a start. So great article from Rob Williams on that one, and we're going to segue into our next topic, which is, of course, talking about, Canucks practice updates for tonight's game against the Florida Panthers. So let's bring this up. It's going to make sure it's brought up. Awesome. And this is obviously come to us by our friends at Canucks Army. This is scenes from practice. Canucks put DeBrusk back on the top line. I don't know why they decided to do that. I'm not a big fan of that. But as I mentioned in our first topic, Hoglander is set to draw in versus the Panthers. Obviously, big fan of Hoglander being back in the lineup, although I still don't think he should have been scratched. But this article is written by Jeff Patterson, Canucks beat reporter, and he goes on to say the Vancouver Canucks showed a couple of new looks during a 45-minute practice on Monday morning at Rogers Arena. The team had all of its players on the ice after giving veterans Brock Besser, Philip Hronik, and Marcus Pettersson the day off on Sunday. He takes a look at what we saw for our line combinations. He has DeBrusk, Pettersson, and O'Connor as your first line. So O'Connor remains on that first line as we saw in the last couple games, I believe. And then he has the Bro line still intact with Ogren, Rossi, and Besser. He has Sasson, Bluger, and Carlson as your third line. Then he's got Hoglander slotted in on your fourth line with Ratu and Kane. So Kane's back down to the fourth line. And of course, Douglas was the odd man out. He will likely be a healthy scratch in tonight's game. And then Jeff goes on to say D pairs rotating. So there was no set D pairings. They were rotating them, which is a little interesting. So perhaps we'll know maybe later today on what the actual D pairings will actually be in this game tonight. Now, after playing the past couple of games in a fourth line role, Jake DeBrusk returned to the left wing on a line with Elias Pettersson and Drew O'Connor. And after being a healthy scratch for the previous 2 contests, Niels Hoglander will draw back into the lineup on Tuesday against Florida. Hoglander skated at practice with Aatu Ratu and Evander Kane, as we mentioned. Little ironic that Hoglander is playing on the line with Evander Kane, considering Kane's kind of been the reason why he was scratched for the previous 2 games. Little bit of irony there. Newcomer Curtis Douglas appeared to be the odd man out, as we mentioned, up front and skated as an extra at practice. The 6 defensemen on the roster rotated through pairings when the Canucks conducted line rushes, so there may be changes coming to the way the Blue Liners are deployed against the Panthers. There are no extra bodies on defense right now, so there's no doubt which 6 will be playing. It's just a question of how they'll be rolled out. Defenseman Elias Pettersson, DPD, participated fully for a second straight day after leading Saturday's game with an apparent knee injury. Pettersson had medical imaging done on Sunday morning and declared himself fit to practice and play, which is, of course, great news for the Canucks, as I know a lot of us were worried that we might be down a defenseman. We're already down Joseph, he is still not cleared to compete. So that they would have had to call somebody up from Abbotsford, potentially maybe even 2 defensemen from Abbey if DPD was actually going to miss any time. And we already know that Abbotsford is dealing with their own injuries. Of course, we know they've been dressing 9 forwards. Yes, you heard that right. Abbotsford has been dressing only 9 forwards the last few games because they're dealing with injuries themselves. One change of note saw Zeke William getting an opportunity to practice with the team's top power play unit. And Adam Foote confirmed Monday that he'll be going back to Kevin Lankinen in goal on Tuesday. Tolopilo has started the last 2 games, but struggled in Saturday's 5-2 loss to Seattle. Lankinen has shown flashes of his best form in recent outings, allowing just 3 goals in regulation time in his last 2 outings, a 3-2 overtime loss in Winnipeg, and a 2-0 loss to Ottawa to open this 8-game homestand. Now, this is what they heard. Adam Foote on working with Nils Hoglander to clean up a few habits in his game. We're trying to change just a couple of things he does when he forces it at the blue line. He wants it so bad it can be a little bit more predictable. He'll get more offensive zone time, so we want him to make those decisions. We also don't want him to go into a game, feel like he makes one mistake, he's going to get pulled. So we want him to play the right way. But we've had a great conversation with him, and our coaches have been working with him. We want to correct a few things, and hopefully he'll have a great game tomorrow, as in today. Liam Ogren talked about his chemistry he's been developing with Marco Rossi as well as Brock Besser. Obviously it's a great opportunity for me to play with 2 great hockey players, very skilled, and it's been going pretty good. I think we have been creating a lot of good chances and scored some goals, so it's been a good run. So great stuff from J-Pat. I really hope someone asked him about the whole coin bro line thing. I kind of want to get both Besser, Rossi, and his reactions on it. I think that would be pretty funny. But those are your updates from at least Monday's practice. Maybe we'll do a quick video, talking about, today's practice. We'll see about that. But this has been the Nucks Report, brought to you by me. I hope you guys enjoy this. And before we sign off, I want to give a shout out and thank you to my sponsors of this video. Of course, we have DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. But before we thank them, let's talk about the NHL odds for this game as I take some hairs off my microphone. But looking at the lines and odds, since the Canucks are playing tonight, we're going to do the Canucks and Panthers. Panthers are at a minus 1.5 and a plus 170 on the puck line. The Canucks are at a plus 1.5 and a minus 205 on the puck line, while the Panthers are a minus 148 on the money line. The Canucks are a plus 124 on the money line. So, and just a reminder, these odds are, of course, subject to change. And, of course, please play responsibly. But on that note, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hit that like button and subscribe to The Line Change, and be sure to have your notifications turned on so don't miss more in-depth analysis of your Vancouver Canucks. As I mentioned, shout out to DraftKings Sportsbook, which is, of course, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, is built for the fastest game on ice. With player props and live betting, every shift, every shot, every save gives you options to get in on the game with DraftKings Sportsbook. New customers bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN, that's code THPN, to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino in Kansas, wager tax pass-through may apply in Illinois, 21 plus in most states. Void in Ontario, restrictions apply. Bet must win to receive bonus bets, which will expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. This is a limited time offer. Copyright 2026 NHL, all rights reserved. This video has been a presentation of both DraftKings Sportsbook as well as the Hockey Podcast Network. Be sure to check out the network for your favorite podcast covering your favorite team. at thehockeypodcastnetwork.com, the home of hockey podcasts, where it's every team, everywhere. Once again, drop your comments down below. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next Nucks Report.